Welcome back to the Wellness Table. Hey, wellness friends. I am your host, Dr. Cheryl. And in today's episode, we're diving into the complex world of our body's natural health defense and how our diet and lifestyle can play a key role. And as we look at diet and lifestyle, today I want to focus also on the topic of alcohol. I've had a lot of questions about where I stand on alcohol. Is it something that's good for our heart, as we've seen in the research in the 80s, 90s, where we began to even see that alcohol or red wine was recommended as a heart health beverage? I also want to dive into, as we look at alcohol, what's its effect on the body and my body's natural defense. One thing I want to do today is highlight some of the key points from Dr. William Li's book. He's a prominent physician and scientist, vascular biology, and author of Eat to Beat Disease. And I'm going to be delving into some of what he talks about that I found really interesting as he looks at the pillars of our body's health defense. And today I'm going to highlight stem cells in that. So I found that to be super interesting and I wanted to share it with you today. It has some personal implication for me. I have personally been hit by the pain point of cancer in my family and attacking my 17-year-old daughter. And doing everything that you can when we get a pain point, when we get a cancer diagnosis on anyone in our family, and for me, hitting my child, we're looking at everything. We're looking at every natural defense. It's like, do we do chemotherapy? Do we do radiation? Basically, how can I save my baby? And this was prior to having my doctorate in clinical nutrition. I think it drove me to learn more about nutrition. I was a registered dietitian at that time. But it really opened my eyes to, are we a victim of our genetics? If we have cancer in our family, my mom died of endometrial cancer. I'm looking at my genetic risk, having a mother and a child that both I lost to cancer. Scary stuff, tough stuff. And also as we look at grief and how we survive that. And I will be talking about this. You will hear me talk about it all the time because it's real to me. And I want this to be a place where I am very transparent and share with you that it's not all just the perfect every single day. I eat perfect. I do it all right. And I've got this down. But I definitely believe in nutrition and lifestyle as being very key to optimal health. And yet I say all of that and I fed my daughter very healthy and I lost her to cancer. So I've constantly looked for answers after her death. What was it? Could I have stopped it? And I just found Dr. Li's book to be very interesting, to see him diving deep into the effect of nutrition and can we heal cancer. And so you're going to hear me talk a lot about it because I'm very interested in cancer, something that I had very least interest in, I would say, when I was studying nutrition initially. And now it's probably become one of my hottest topics as I look at insulin resistance, as I look at metabolic health, but also what do we do to fight cancer and how can we stop it in its tracks. So today I'll hit some of those points that he talks about in his book, and then just talking about alcohol because that was a question that was asked to me. And I found the implications for cancer. So I thought it sort of tied together today with what's our body's natural health defense. And I've heard we get 10,000 attacks every day to our DNA for cancer. And how do we fight that? And does it make a difference if I eat foods that can fight these free radicals and change my risk of cancer from that one day? Or what if I miss a day of eating blueberries? Am I doomed? And I think it gets to a point where it can sort of drive us crazy. And so I'm not really here to do that. I just think it's really interesting to me. And it may be interesting to those of you that will like this podcast because I have a lot of whys. I think I was born asking a lot of questions. And so here I'll share a lot of what I learned as I searched for answers to my whys and what drove me in my academics. It drove me in my personal life, what I do. And so This is a great place for you if you have a lot of whys and a lot of questions, because I love to explore them. I don't have all of the answers, but I sure love diving into them, and I like to explore experts that know them as well. But for me, I always come back to, is there something that I can eat every day, or something very simple that I can do in my personal life to fight those free radicals, to protect my body, to improve my body's natural health defense? And so if you're interested in that, you're going to like today's episode, because it's all about boosting our body's health defense. And I'm going to hit that topic of alcohol. And each week I'll be hitting a topic of a specific food or an item that in our food or in our nutrition lifestyle that we can do to improve or boost our body's natural defense. And at the same time, I'm like most people, if it doesn't taste good, I'm usually out. So I want to find a way that we can enjoy the food we eat as well. But let's talk a little bit about it, and let's get into it. I think one of the first things for us to talk about as well is to understand really what the definition of health is. And it's like, am I healthy? Is my new puppy, we see Blueberries right here with me. Is she healthy? How do we know if somebody's healthy? And we typically will look at the absence of disease or the absence of a pain or a pain point. And what I have learned more and more is that health, the definition of health, really needs a major upgrade. And what's clear is that our health is an active state, a process. It's our lifestyle. So we can't just say, well, today on Fridays, I'm healthy today because I don't have high blood pressure. I don't have a cancer diagnosis. So that means I'm healthy. But we can say, I've done everything I can in my lifestyle and what I eat, what I'm doing to be as healthy as I can be today. And that truly is what I would define as our best health for us today. Our body is protected by a series of remarkable defense systems that are firing on all cylinders. And some of the words from Dr. William Lee's book is essentially, this is happening from us from birth till our last day of life. And that keeps our cells and organs functioning smoothly. And these health defenses are hardwired in our body to protect us. And what's amazing is these natural health defenses that we're going to just touch on today are so powerful that we're seeing that they can even reverse diseases like cancer and heal blood vessels. And of course, that got my attention because I know that we need elasticity, I should say, of the blood vessel wall to have really good circulation and healthy blood vessels. And we also need to fight cancer every single day. And so, but the question is, can we reverse it? So I love to see a prominent physician who specializes in vascular biology, a scientist, and write about reversal of disease, because that's not super accepted in traditional medicine. It's like we can prevent disease, we can manage disease, we can treat disease. But the word reverse, I was taught to not use when I was in my doctoral program. So I'd love to see that word coming out more, because can this natural health defense that Dr. Lee's talking about, that we're learning in vascular biology, are they powerful enough to reverse disease, a disease like cancer? And so will be constantly diving into that and talking about it, and all the time that I'm really talking in my membership, the Dr. Cheryl membership. I take deep dives into all of these topics because, of course, it's my passion. It's what I love to do. But let's just at first look at that the common denominator of health and the early onset of disease is if we can treat disease and live more years healthy. And let me just kind of rephrase that. If we focus on these common denominators of health, and if we can intercept disease early, before disease sets in, we can better treat disease. We can live younger or live more healthy years. So if we look at these health defenses as the hidden defenses of our body, and they heal us from within, then it's possible potentially to improve our health and heal our bodies from the inside out. So I'm all about it. And what this means is that maybe we can control our own health destiny. I mean, that's awesome if that's something that we can do. And that's what I spend my life work exploring. So I'm really excited today to share some of these things. So I want to highlight some of the points of the book really quick. Again, it's Dr. William Lee's book on Eat to Beat Disease, and just a really great read. And I would highly recommend this for anybody to get. It's the new science of how your body can heal itself. And I'm highlighting some of the points to just kind of get started with summarizing really what I want to talk about today with how does diet and lifestyle play a role in this. But Dr. William Lee is a great believer in food having the power to heal. So I'm very aligned with his message and the power of food as medicine. It's really great to see a credible physician come forward with this strong message. We also see that his book comes with the recommendations right on his book from Dr. Mark Hyman. Many of you know him as a prominent physician who right on his website claims all about food as medicine. So again, I'm aligned with these types of health professionals that are stepping out, even though nutrition is not their expertise in medical school, they have seen the power of food as medicine, and they have taken that on as a personal specialty for them. I see Dr. Dean Ornish also on this book. He's a cardiologist, a pioneer in lifestyle medicine that I have great respect for. And he calls this book a trailblazing book. It's about being in control of our own health destiny and making decisions that can help the body heal itself. Powerful words. There's many other recommendations here, but those are some of the leaders that I wanted to highlight. But let's just highlight, just going to mention the 5 natural health defenses and how the body heals itself. So when you want to eat to support each health defense, you can learn how to use your diet to maintain your best health and beat disease. So let's hit these 5 powerful natural body defense systems that form the key pillars to your health. And each one of these is influenced by your diet and your lifestyle. Number 1, angiogenesis. I'm not going to dive deep into that one today, but I just want you to know that that is one of our natural health defenses for our body. And this is essentially how our body grows new blood vessels. And I'm going to talk about this in another podcast because it deserves its own highlight. But it is one of the ways that our body improves circulation and repairs blood vessels. And we see food has a prominent part in that. And microbiome, this is our gut health. And this is a big buzzword right now. Everybody's looking at gut health and microbiome. And our gut is essentially a hose that goes from our mouth to excretion. And this gut is where the microbiome is housed inside this hose. And healthy bacteria in our body act to defend our health and boost our immune system. So we've learned a lot about gut health and healthy bacteria in the last 20 years. I think it's one of the cutting edge parts of nutrition science. And it's something that we will talk a lot about, but we know food is a big player in healthy gut microbiome as well, and really big with supporting our immune system. Then we have DNA protection, repairing our body's DNA from the environment. You will see me talk about how to repair free radical damage from our environment, from foods that are damaging to our DNA by eating a cup of blueberries. And we see an 18% reduction in free radical damage. We also want to think about DNA as our body's genetic code, but how much more it is that it plays a huge role in our body's natural health defense. So just a little highlight of it, we can turn on or turn off health promoting DNA, or disease promoting DNA can be turned on by not sleeping, sleeping less than 6 hours a night for 7 days. But we can turn on our healthy DNA, our healthy genes that promote good health in just 7 days of getting that extra sleep. So that's why it's more than just food. It's also our lifestyle. So it's super important. And you'll see in my daily health score, that is my proprietary work that I created in my doctoral work at Rutgers. I wanted a prescription, the specific dose that you could complete yourself, not a researcher, that was super simple, that could outline all of these things that help your body fight disease. And so they'll all be lined up in it, and it's a 20-point score. And in our membership, that's something that's a part of our digital program where we've put together a really exciting process to be able to have you know exactly what you need to do to be as healthy as you can be and to boost your immune system. I want to hit next one is immunity of these key natural health defenses that Dr. William Li talks about. And one thing I really liked that he said that really stood out to me, because I've seen Dr. Peter Attia talk about it too, is how to be a kick-ass 80-year-old. But Dr. William Li states in his book that even an aged immune system, someone that's 80 years old in top shape, meaning a really healthy immune system, he's saying can beat metastatic cancer. Well, that's really powerful and very exciting news, and something that I think we have a lot to learn. I don't see specific research supporting it, but to know that a scientist in vascular biology is setting the tone, I'm here to hear where that goes and excited that he is pursuing research like this. So I'm all about listening and watching what he does along the way. But the one we're going to hit today is regeneration. And I'm super interested in stem cells. And this is how our body regenerates and maintains and repairs our body throughout our lives. So as we look at this, Dr. William Li points out that we are born with 750 million remaining stem cells that are left over from forming us as a fetus. And these 750 stem cells, he describes them as being stuffed into our bone marrow, brain, lungs, into tissue in our body. And they're all there waiting for when we need them after we're born and all the way until our last breath of life. And he describes that this is what we need when we need to regenerate our liver from over drinking on a weekend. Some of these foods can help us regenerate from deadly stem cells that would spark cancer growth. So here we are looking at how can we fight cancer? How can we repair our liver? How can we repair our lung? Like secondhand smoke. If we look at all of these things, are we doomed because we've been exposed? If we smoked for 10 years of our life, can we heal these things? And it's our stem cells that are there to help us fight and regenerate from something that went wrong. So if we're interested in longevity and optimal health, we have to look at preserving and not damaging our stem cells over our lifetime, because this is how we regenerate our body's natural defense system for good health and healing. And yet they're highly vulnerable to common factors that can assault our body throughout our lifespan. So some of the most damaging things that we can do in our diet and lifestyle is to cause stem cell damage. And again, this is a key to our body's natural health defense and to live younger longer. So I want to highlight some of these things that are key in preventing let's just look at what will damage our stem cell. And the number one that we see is tobacco, smoking tobacco. During the process of inhaling the cigarette smoke, the thought is that the oxygen deficit that occurs during this inhalation starts to recruit some of the cells into the bloodstream, some of these stem cells. But habitual smoking eventually depletes the number of stem cells stored in our bone marrow, leaving fewer cells available for regeneration and repair over time. So what's also worse is that these remaining stem cells, they don't function properly because they're damaged. So the compromises in the number of stem cells will help to explain why there's direct damage from smoking that's done to our blood vessels. This might help us to understand why we often look at smoking as causing this microvascular disease. I've talked in another podcast about it, but it comes to my mind again right now as I think about when I was doing my doctoral residency with a cardiologist. I was amazed to see what the coronary arteries look like for someone that had been smoking for, say, over 10 years. Very tiny 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter coronary arteries in diameter, where a normal healthy person might have 7 to 9 millimeter size coronary arteries. But someone that was smoking, you could actually see the size of the coronary arteries small. And with diabetes, I could see them about 4 millimeters. So not a lot bigger, but the smallest, like people that were smoking, I could almost determine by their coronary arteries that they had smoked because their coronary arteries look more like spider webs. And again, then anything under 2 millimeters at that time, I think we're still at that point, you can't put a stent in. So we're talking about a bypass surgery that needs to be done if somebody has any kind of occlusion. You know, you want to have your healthy blood vessels. This is what fuels our, brings fuel, oxygen to our heart muscle. So smoking is a big one. And you can see that smoking, habitual smoking, is a stem cell killer. And we definitely can see its effect on cardiovascular or on our blood vessels. Another is high levels of LDL cholesterol. This is what we call the bad cholesterol. It has been shown to impair stem cell function. And this low density lipoprotein is what we get in high saturated fat when we're eating a lot of total fat, in our dietary fat. When we see LDL go up, we also see it very genetic, but this is typically related to the diet and lifestyle. HDL is what we call the good high density lipoprotein or the good cholesterol. And HDL is actually been shown to slow down cell death of these endothelial progenitor stem cells, meaning that if we have higher good cholesterol, we're protecting our stem cells. And if we have lower, or I should say, the lower levels of high density lipoprotein, we want those numbers high. But with our LDL, the bad cholesterol, we want those numbers low, like ideally under 100 milligrams per deciliter for an LDL level. So this is how we can be protective with our stem cell. And again, this is very much a strategy that we can prevent atherosclerosis, protecting our blood vessels, and also that fatty plaque that builds up on the blood vessels. All of these things can be protected by HDL or higher HDL or good cholesterol. And a lot of people are genetically will have a tendency to have a higher HDL, but we see exercise is a way to increase HDL. But it's a tougher one to raise. And LDL cholesterol is something that we want to lower, and that would be based on reducing our dietary fat. And also, I find that total cholesterol is raised by stress. So when I lost my daughter, I've always had low cholesterol. But after I lost my daughter, I had very high cholesterol for about 2 years. And, you know, we need cholesterol for stress hormones, and that was a very high stress time. So I think this is how stress might be affecting our cholesterol levels, which could impact how stress can ultimately, I think, be the number one killer. I do see that stress can impact our quality of life and our length of life, and I think it's probably one of the biggest killers. So ultimately, this could be one of the mechanisms. Just exploring it, I love to just think about all the possibilities. But then we're going to look at high blood sugar, and this impairs stem cell function. We think of high blood sugar with diabetes, but what we see is people that have diabetes have fewer stem cells, and the ones that they do have are unable to do their job properly. They have poor function to them. So, but we see that people that are exposed to high sugar environment, they may not have diabetes, but when we're talking about insulin resistance last week, our insulin's job is to stop us from running high blood sugar. And so it will sort of regulate it that if we can't get that cell, the insulin isn't working properly and our tissue in our body is a little bit numb to the insulin and we become insulin resistant, our body will store that as fat. So as we look at this process and its impact on our stem cells, we're seeing that there's a negative impact on stem cells from running high blood sugar. So let's think about how in the diet, that would be reducing refined sugars and high fructose corn syrup. We talked about this as a beverage and why people are craving these energy drinks and sodas that have sugar and caffeine. And what is that doing to our body? Because we can see high fructose corn syrup as well as refined sugars can really spike blood sugars. So those are some of the things that we can do in our lifestyle to protect our stem cell and be as healthy as we can be. And again, the researchers found that the endothelial progenitor cells, these are stem cells that generate blood vessels, were compromised by almost 50% in the people that had type 2 diabetes. And there was also impairment in individuals that had blood sugar levels that were elevated but didn't have diabetes. So it's really important for us to look at blood sugar levels. Managing our blood sugar has an impact on our stem cells. And of course, that's what we're talking about today as we're looking at how do we fight disease and how do we live healthy longer through diet and lifestyle. And these are some of the things that we can look at. You know, diabetes is a pandemic that affects 422 million people worldwide and leads to 1.6 million deaths yearly. And stem cell crippling is a problem of gigantic proportions when you realize that diabetes is a pandemic. There's so many people that have it and it's destroying stem cells. So we're talking about shortening life potentially or increasing risk of disease, which will in turn typically have less healthy years of life. Diabetes is also a major underlying cause of heart attacks, stroke, blindness. We know all the drill, kidney failure, difficult to heal wounds, and disabilities that are all caused by issues related to diabetes. And these are all, even lower extremity amputations can be related to complications from diabetes and running high blood sugar levels and our insulin not able to do its job. And again, all of this will tie to causing dysfunctional stem cells. So those are sort of the highlights as we're kind of coming through the things that can destroy our stem cells through our diet and lifestyle. Now it brings us to alcohol. And some of the research that I was looking at and some of the work that I see with Dr. William Lee as well is that binge drinking has been shown to destroy stem cells and damage stem cell function. So alcohol can affect stem cells in a number of ways. Small daily alcohol intake seemed to increase stem cells in the circulatory system compared to people that did not drink. But these stem cells were found to be impaired and less effective. And in fact, it was compared to an inebriated stem cell, as if when you're inebriated, you have a difficulty walking. You would have difficulty walking in a straight line. So if we think of an impaired stem cell, it's potentially inebriated. It was sort of the wording of it. Another thing that we look at with alcohol's effect on stem cell that is very clear that we have seen a history of for many years is many of you may have heard of fetal alcohol syndrome. This is a disastrous consequence when pregnant women consume a lot of alcohol. The developing fetus suffers from permanent brain damage and growth abnormalities. Alcohol is toxic to the fetal stem cells, which is the key time that our stem cells are doing their most important work is growing a fetus and growing a baby. And the devastation of fetal alcohol may be due in part to the stem cell damage. So a lot of work that's being done, and it was interesting to have that highlighted as I was looking at some of the work on this and stem cell. But the other thing that I was looking at was binge drinking destroying brain neurons. I saw a social post and it was about even one drink a day would shrink the brain. So, I'm not sure. Some of these are small studies, but this study that was from some of the researchers from the University of Kentucky found that binge drinking lowers the activity of the brain stem cells called the oligodendrocyte progenitors. So these are stem cells that are needed to make new neurons for the body. And they're also responsible, these brain neurons, for building short and long-term memory. The good news is that this damage was able to be reversed when the binge drinking stopped. Another thing that we saw with binge drinking was insulin resistance for as much as 2 to 3 days after the binging event. And a binge drinking, just to define it by what these articles, they defined it as having 5 drinks of alcohol within 2 hours for men and 4 drinks for women in a 2 to 4 hour period. And doing this even once a month or more was associated with an increased risk of metabolic syndrome. And this is basically rooted in insulin resistance. So that was one of the things that I was highlighting last week as I looked at what are some of the causes of insulin resistance. And that's why alcohol made the list. So I wanted to talk about that this week to kind of tie that in because I said that I would. And as we're looking at it, I was seeing alcohol also causing stem cell damage. And also its effect on brain neurons. And so this was very interesting because now we're going to see binge drinking affecting stem cells, but also insulin resistance. So we're hitting the body's natural health reserve and health defense. And at the same time, we're increasing insulin resistance, which means we're making all the cells in our body resistant or numbed to what insulin's job is to do in our body, to make sure that blood sugars are regulated and to keep us at our optimal with energy and to store excess fat that's needed and glycogen storage for muscle and for exercise. So if we think that on a binge drinking, they're saying even up to 54 hours, some of the studies were showing that there was an insulin resistance that lasted that long after a binge drinking event. And this is a particular public health concern because of the incidence of binge drinking continues to rise, and especially in the young population. There's a lot of people that may not drink at all week. They might drink on the weekends, or maybe it is just once a month. And so we think that's not really going to be a problem. And that's why I thought this work was very interesting, because binge drinking as rarely as once a month, some of the studies were showing was associated with type 2 diabetes and increasing the metabolic dysfunction, which means it's affecting our mitochondria. It's making a mitochondria abnormality when we begin to numb our body. Insulin resistance is affecting that mitochondria. And this persists after the alcohol has been metabolized and cleared from the system. So there's this delayed response. So if you're binge drinking twice a week, you may be in a constant insulin resistant state just from drinking excess alcohol. And what I find is interesting is that in the podcast last week, I talked about the signs. How would you know if you had insulin resistance without ever having a blood test? And the typical blood test does not measure fasting insulin. So I wanted to share that with you. I shared it last week, but this is the topic of, and you might want to listen to that podcast. I'll put a link to that podcast on insulin resistance. What are the signs? And I'm going to share that with you now, but the deeper dive on that, I'll have the link to that podcast in the show notes so that you can also listen to that podcast. But it's about waist circumference. So a waist circumference over 35 inches for women and over 40 inches for men is a 95 to 98% accuracy that they have insulin resistance. And what that means is that our body, their body, the waist circumference is associated with insulin resistance at a very high percent. So this is one way that we can measure insulin resistance without ever spending $1 in healthcare. You can check it for yourself. And I also saw that there's a study showing that the average women's clothing size across the United States is a size 14. And I was like, I wonder what waist size that is. And I looked it up, and it's a 36 and a half waist on average or above. So this would mean that the average female in the United States, adult female, that's above the age of 18, is showing signs of insulin resistance. So as we begin to look at our waist circumference when we're young, and we begin to see adding a little bit more inches to our waist by the time we're 50, most people have a different waist size than they did at 18. Now I want to come back to this alcohol, because how many of you have heard of a beer belly? And so there's some connection here with waist size. So I just want to say, let's look at waist size as a real great risk factor for insulin resistance and see if what we're doing in our diet and lifestyle is making a difference. Again, what we found in our 10-day Take 10 program, it was a full immersive gold standard 10-day wellness program. where people would come and spend the night. It was a retreat. And we would feed them 30 meals over 10 days. And we would have them exercise. They had medical appointments. It was a full lifestyle makeover. And in those 10 days, we found that people that had insulin resistance improved their fasting insulin levels by 30%. And we had an average drop of 1 inch in waist circumference. Very exciting numbers. But we did not serve alcohol, by the way, in the program. So these were some exciting things. We were trying to do everything we could because we were doing before and after. So if somebody came to the program with their baseline labs, we did all the metabolic testing, VO2 max. We had a lot of pre and post testing. So we had a really great way to see that what we were recommending really worked in 10 days. And then we followed up for several years. And this was super exciting, is to see insulin resistance reversing and seeing insulin sensitivity changing as quickly as just 10 days. So insulin's so important because it stimulates glucose uptake. It's the transport. So it helps us fuel our cells. And it's very important for helping us to regulate our blood sugar, not having high blood sugar. So if we have insulin resistance, we can run higher blood sugars. And again, that's a part of destroying stem cells and leading us down a road to cardiovascular disease and all the other risk factors that come with insulin resistance. Insulin is a build store fat hormone. And so it makes us feel full. So when we have impaired insulin action, we call this insulin resistance, where the body tissue has become numbed to insulin's role in transporting glucose into the cell and fueling the body. And it makes it difficult for the organs and cells to essentially talk to each other. So again, let's look at that waist circumference to see what the results and to see if you have insulin resistance. But overall, we are talking in general about how we can use diet and lifestyle to live our very, very best life. How can we use it to boost our body's natural health defense and to preserve our stem cells? Because this is the key to fighting disease. This is the key to living healthy longer. So we've got to look at alcohol, and we also want to look at, again, some of the other research that talks about, like in the Mediterranean diet, that alcohol had a good benefit with red wine, and that's part of the Mediterranean diet and lifestyle. We also see that in our U.S. guidelines for alcohol intake in the 90s to 2000, it was like, boy, if you're not drinking that glass of red wine every day as a female, you should start now. And then I began to see those recommendations slowly shift. And it moved to, if you don't drink, don't start drinking, because there isn't any health benefit from drinking. But if you do drink, try to stick with a maximum of 1 drink daily and 5 drinks per week. So these are the recommendations that I've put in my daily health score, because that's the best that we know today. I have seen people say and make the comment, and I've often wondered that in 20 years, will alcohol go down the same road that tobacco did? It's tabooed. Everybody would think it was terrible if we were drinking alcohol the way now. Tobacco was so popular in the 70s, 80s, the 60s. Every newscaster was smoking, every journalist, they were all smoking when we saw them on television. And we can see these old vintage shows and seeing that tobacco was lots of people smoked and did not realize it had any types of negative health benefit. And now we see alcohol as very much a part of everyday life. And when we're starting to see these studies that are saying just 1 drink a day can shrink the white and gray matter in the brain, we definitely can see the negative of binge drinking. So the recommendation now is, let's don't destroy stem cells by binge drinking. Let's be careful and be responsible in how much we do drink. Let's also look at, as we're looking at insulin resistance, we see the problem with binge drinking. So I think that's very clear that binge drinking is a problem. And that's 5 drinks, let's just say, in a day. So the recommendation of 1 or less drinks in a day, a glass of red wine, that would align a little bit more to what we see in the Mediterranean diet, which shows long-term health benefits for people that have a glass of red wine. And we see there's resveratrol, and we see some of the benefits of red wine. But we can get resveratrol in grape juice. So it's what's the effect of the alcohol is really the question. And I think we're going to see that rolled out clearer and clearer as we get more and more research on this. I keep wondering also about what's alcohol, like ethanol's effect on gut microbes. Would it be destructive to healthy gut bacteria? So again, that's another topic. We'll talk about it. But in a summary, what we do know is alcohol is not needed for health, for a healthy lifestyle or for longevity. That we know is clear. And if we don't drink, let's don't start drinking specifically for health purposes. And if you do drink, my recommendation is drink responsibly and follow the guidelines for no more than 1 drink daily, which let's say a 5-ounce drink of red wine. So avoiding and removing all binge drinking would be our ideal way to protect our stem cells and to help us reverse insulin resistance and improve insulin sensitivity. So these are some of the very important things that we can look at to be protective. So we know that if we summarize this, that if we avoid exposure to tobacco and air pollutants, if we avoid heavy drinking, binge drinking to avoid risk to our stem cells, if we look at watching our LDL levels and keeping our HDL cholesterol as high as we can and our LDL cholesterol as low as we can, and we watch those refined beverages, there's one more thing that's a lot harder for us to avoid, in fact, impossible, and that's called aging. So as we get older, our ability to regenerate our body's cells diminishes. So when we get older, we have natural, fewer stem cells in our bone marrow, in our tissue. And these stem cells become less active or less functional than they were during our younger years. So I think the summary here that I got from a lot of this was that stem cells were born with approximately 750 million of them, and we need to preserve them, their functionality, by our diet and lifestyle. That's our body's natural health defense. But also when we look at diet and lifestyle, we can see that just small changes improve our length of life. So we know that we can live at least 10 to 12 healthy years, living younger longer by changes in our diet and lifestyle. And again, aging is still happening. We're having birthdays every year, and that's definitely something that we cannot make any difference. We cannot change, but we can preserve those stem cells throughout our life cycle. So that's one of the most important things. The next questions I ask is, can we preserve our healthy stem cells with food? I wanted to know what Dr. William Lee said about it. And I thought it was interesting that cocoa came to the top, like an 80% cocoa. So like drinking 2 cups of dark cocoa filled with polyphenols was really powerful in repairing stem cells. So again, another case of food as medicine. He highlighted omega-3 fatty acids that can improve vascular damage to the vascular or the blood vessels with decreasing inflammation and reducing our risk of atherosclerosis. But I was interested that it also increased the production, omega-3 fats, of these endothelial progenitor stem cells. So this means it can help regenerate oxygen-deprived muscle. So a diet with omega-3 fatty acids compared to other fats increased these endothelial progenitor stem cells by 30%. Some of the things that would improve circulation, reduce inflammation. Some of the foods are, let's just hit them quickly here, is flaxseed, chia seed, walnuts, soy, and omega-3 rich fish. Some of the other foods that he talked about were whole wheat with the whole grain intact and the fiber and some of the polyphenols that were really protective for our endothelial progenitor stem cells. and help them function better. Green beans hit the list, which I thought was great. I'll just hit them quickly. Green tea, turmeric, resveratrol. This is where the red wine would come in, but we can also get that in grapes. We find it in other fruits, and that's kind of that, see it in the purpley color. I think that's why blueberries hit the top. But I also found resveratrol, it's in peanuts, pistachios, and again, protective of our stem cell. The carotenoids. So when we think of that yellowy orange color, it's also in leafy green vegetables, kale, spinach, goji berries. This is also really protective for the stem cells that we're seeing, specifically protecting the eye from macular degeneration. So this is stem cell protection from food again. Green tea, mangoes, red tea, these things all hit the list. But if you notice something, that the Mediterranean diet is lining up for many of the foods they're naturally in the Mediterranean diet that hit this list. I thought it was also interesting that a high-fat diet, Dr. William Lee points out, with high saturated fats is very damaging to stem cells. High refined sugars, which we know would be very damaging to stem cells. High salt can be damaging to stem cells. And then I was looking at his list of foods that killed cancer stem cells that were growing cancer. Green tea hit the list, purple potatoes. I don't eat those very often. I thought that was interesting. Walnuts, extra virgin olive oil, olives would do it as well. Quercetin. So apples are always hitting this list as well. Apples, capers, jalapeno peppers, and also soy hit this list. And as we look at it, I also was really interested that he talked about the ketogenic diet. And the ketogenic diet, again, is super high fat, very low carb, that mimics fasting for the purpose of generating ketones in the body. And because cancer cells cannot adapt like a healthy cell and use ketones as energy, they're finding that a ketogenic diet might be very helpful in slowing or fighting tumor growth. That was very interesting to me. He also talked about that with his vascular, or with these blood vessels and growing blood vessels, because tumors need blood vessels and they need to get a source of fuel. So the ketogenic diet now, that would be high saturated fat, high fats, and yet we see that in a ketogenic diet, it was shrinking brain tumors by 50% and lengthening survival. And these, again, were in animal studies. We have not seen these in human studies. So it'll be very interesting to see how the ketogenic diet plays out as a potential way to support lowering high sugar consumption and helping to inhibit cancer growth in a cancer patient. And we're seeing that some of these studies were the glioblastoma. So it's kind of a new thing. I have not dived into that, but I'm going to look at that one more as well. But in general, I recommend not having refined sugars and high refined sugars in the diet, and eating carbs from whole sources. But that is not a ketogenic diet. So again, we're talking about that specifically as relates to someone that has cancer. Then we're seeing the saturated fats can destroy the stem cells that can cause cancer. So again, it's always this back and forth nutrition science. I'm always there for it. It's always can always throw off some confusion, but ultimately we have to focus on what we know. And basically, whether you're an athlete building your muscles, or a pregnant mother building a fetus, or someone's fighting the disease or aging, the right food can help boost the number and performance of your stem cells and your ability to regenerate your body. This is the body's natural health defense. So you can protect your health, keep your mind sharp with brain degeneration, heal wounds, and keep your body in a youthful shape. So this is what we know that's really the best. Let's summarize it, that we know that to protect our stem cells, smoking, high refined sugars, binge alcohol drinking, and high LDL cholesterol. And these are some of the killers of stem cell damage. And each week we'll look at how does food impact our health? How does it help us fight disease? How does it help us live younger, longer? I felt like this was a really great topic this week. My goal is that it's all about feeling great, healing our body and fighting disease, and living younger, longer through food, nutrition, and lifestyle. It's the most powerful medicine of all. And we can be in control of our own health destiny by the choices that we make each day. This is true health. It's a process, it's a lifestyle, and it's a diet and lifestyle that we can choose. So I want to highlight that in the Dr. Cheryl Plus membership, if you like this kind of topic and you want to know more of the whys, or you want to live your healthiest life or transform your health, I've taken and put into my membership something that's very one of a kind, that I will take you through the experience as if you're a client coming to Take 10, and you'll get all of the best of Take 10. And I'll take you through that journey of being in the program, all from the comfort of your home in a digital program. And at the same time, you can also be a part of our wellness community and have access to me. I do private podcasts for the members every single week. And that's definitely something that I love doing. And I'm super excited to be offering that. And I'll leave a link so that you can, in the show notes, check out my Dr. Cheryl Plus membership. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We're Dr. Cheryl Wellness. We're also on YouTube, so you can watch this podcast or listen to it. Another thing I want to say is that I am a previous cookbook author, more choices, over 2 million books sold before I did my doctorate. So I'm like really due to do a new cookbook. But what I did is I put the best, and I'm putting the best of my recipes from my family favorites, from my cookbook favorites, over 2 million books out there, and also from Take 10. These are healthy recipes that you will crave and want to be a part of your favorite breakfasts, your favorite lunches, and your favorite dinners. And they'll all be supportive of helping your body heal itself. So check out the recipes. They're all on my website. The links are below. And I hope to see you next week and at the wellness table, where we're just going to continue to talk about how we can feel great, how we can fight disease, how we can drop our toxic waste, how we can improve insulin sensitivity while we're eating happy, and we can ultimately live healthy longer. Have a great week, wellness friends. And I hope that something here today resonates, and that you can either try a recipe, listen to another podcast, but get started on healing and protecting your stem cells this week.